When Daniel and I first stood in front of the old cottage on Willow Bend Lane, the place looked like it was one strong breeze away from collapsing. The paint peeled in strips like old sunburn, the porch sagged, and the windows were clouded with decades of dust. But I saw something else potential, a place where time could slow down, where we could build a life that felt warm, safe, and entirely ours. Daniel squeezed my hand back then, his eyes bright with the same dream. Our forever home, he whispered. Forever. I clung to that word like it meant something unbreakable. From the start, I took on the renovation with a kind of devotion I didn't know I had. I poured myself into it, literally some days when paint splattered into my hair or my hands shook from holding tools too long. Mornings were for sanding floors, afternoons for choosing tiles, evenings for scrubbing decades of grime from corners that had been untouched for years. And every night, when Daniel came home from work, I'd show him the progress. I waited for his smile, for the warmth I used to feel from him. At first it came easily. He'd kiss my forehead, wrap an arm around my waist and say, "It's amazing, baby. You're amazing." Those words fueled me. But as the months went on, he seemed to fade into the background, physically present, but emotionally distant. He spent more time out of the house, took more calls in private, and when I showed him something new, a perfectly chosen paint color, a refinished cabinet, a backsplash I installed by myself, his eyes were on his phone more than on me. "Looks good," he'd murmur, not even looking up. It stung, but I told myself he was stressed. Work had always been demanding. I convinced myself he still cared, still dreamed with me. After all, this house was for us, for the life we promised each other when we said, "I do." Sometimes love means giving the benefit of the doubt, right? That's what I'd always believed. One night, after spending hours lining the hallway with family photos and memories, he came home late, too late. His clothes smelled faintly of beer and something else I couldn't place. His smile was thin, forced. "You okay?" I asked softly. "Yeah, just tired," he replied without meeting my eyes. I reached for him, but he stepped past me, mumbling something about needing a shower. I stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by pictures of a couple who looked happy, hopeful, united. It felt like they were mocking me. Still, I kept working on the house. Maybe I was trying to fix us through the walls. Maybe I believed that once everything was finished, once the place looked perfect, he'd come back to me fully, like the man I used to know. And so, 2 months later, when the final brushstroke dried on the living room wall, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't just a house. It was proof of my love, my effort, my commitment. Daniel walked in just minutes after I cleaned up the last paint tray. I waited for him to see it, to smile, to finally come alive again. Instead, he kept his eyes glued to his phone and said casually, almost carelessly, "Hey, great job. Also, can we talk?" That sentence, soft, hesitant, wrong, hung in the air like a storm cloud just beginning to form. And somewhere deep inside me, something whispered, "This moment will change everything." The morning Tyler arrived, the house felt different before anything even happened. There was a heaviness in the air, like the walls were bracing themselves. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I'd been anxious ever since Daniel said, "My friend needs a place to stay for a while." I tried to tell myself it would be fine. Temporary, manageable, a few days, maybe a week. People help people, that's what marriages were supposed to be built on. I baked muffins that morning, almost to convince myself everything was normal. But the moment I heard the engine roaring up the driveway loud, bass shaking every window, I felt my stomach twist. A massive pickup truck pulled up, coated with dirt like it, had driven through a storm and dragged the storm with it. The passenger side door swung open, and a huge Labrador mix leapt out, paws landing in fresh mud before launching directly at my newly painted porch steps. I winced as muddy prints smeared across the white boards. Then Tyler jumped out, shouting before he even touched the ground. "Danny boy," he hollered, arms wide. "Long time, man, Danny boy. I hadn't heard anyone call my husband that in years." And certainly no one had ever shouted it in front of my home like a frat reunion. Daniel walked outside, smiling so wide it startled me. That smile used to be mine, the smile I used to feel when I came home after a long day. Seeing it now reserved for someone else stung more than I expected. They slapped backs, laughed loudly, talked over each other. Meanwhile, the dog Bear, Tyler called him, ran in circles around them, barking happily and flinging more mud onto the porch. I stepped forward, forcing a smile. "Hi, Tyler. Welcome. Let me help you with your bags." "Nah, it's cool," he said, brushing past me without even making eye contact. "Danny said I could take the spare room. Which one is it?" "Down the hall." My smile faltered. The spare room was my craft room. My space, the one place in the house I hadn't surrendered to the renovation chaos. I was actually using that room, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I can move my things if..." "Perfect," Tyler said, already dragging his duffel bag inside. "That'll work." I looked at Daniel, waiting, praying for him to correct his friend, to at least acknowledge me. But all he said was, "It's temporary. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird." As if I was the problem. As if giving up my space, my comfort, my work didn't matter. Inside, Tyler dropped his bags with a thud loud enough to make the floor groan. Bear barreled in behind him, slipping on the hardwood I spent weeks sanding and sealing. His claws scraped deep enough to leave marks. "Oops," Tyler said with a laugh. "He's a wild one." And my chest tightened. "Could you at least keep him in the living room until..." "Relax," he cut in. "It's just a floor. Just a floor. Just a month of my life. Just my effort turned into nothing in seconds." As the day went on, the invasion only grew worse. Tyler sprawled across the couch, flipping TV channels like he owned the remote. Bear drooled over pillows and barked at shadows. Daniel disappeared with Tyler into the backyard, beers in hand, leaving me to clean the mess. By sunset, the house I had cared for like a living thing no longer felt like mine. It felt invaded. Overrun, loud where it used to be peaceful. And as I stood at the kitchen sink, hands trembling over the soapy water, one single thought looped in my mind: something is terribly, terribly wrong, and it's only just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and in that time, my home transformed into something unrecognizable. The house that once smelled of lavender candles and fresh paint now carried the constant odor of wet dog, unwashed clothes, and stale beer. Tyler seemed to shed mess the way trees shed leaves in the fall, constantly, effortlessly, without a thought of who would clean it up. And Bear, sweet in his own way but wildly destructive, left a trail of chaos everywhere he went. But the worst part wasn't the mess. It was Daniel. Every night he drifted further from me. He came home with stories only Tyler seemed to understand. They had inside jokes now, new routines, shared laughter I didn't belong to. Sometimes the two of them would sit on the porch drinking beer until late at night, talking loudly while I lay awake in bed, listening to the thud of their boots and Bear's barking echo into darkness. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, moving silently around people who didn't notice, didn't care, or didn't want to. One afternoon, after cleaning mud prints from the hallway floor for the third time that week, I found Bear lying on my hand-woven rug. The rug I saved months to buy, with a giant hole chewed dead center. My breath caught. "Bear. No, 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 no." Tyler looked up from the couch, not even pausing his game controller. "Relax, dogs chew stuff. It's natural. That rug was expensive," I said, voice cracking. He shrugged. "Then buy a cheaper one." Heat rushed to my face. "Can you at least try to keep him under control?" "For what? It's not like he's hurting anyone." He snorted, Seriously, you need to chill. You're acting psycho about everything lately. He said it loud enough for Daniel to hear from the kitchen. Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't even look up. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not loudly, but quietly, like a thin thread breaking under too much tension. That night, after cooking dinner for 3 people who barely acknowledged me, I stepped outside to take out the trash. As I crossed the yard, I overheard voices from the patio. They didn't know I was there. Tyler's voice cut through the air first, smug and careless. Told you she'd just deal with it. She's too soft to kick me out. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, she hates confrontation. She'll get over it. Tyler laughed harder. Honestly, dude, you should have let me move in sooner. This place is sick, way nicer than my old apartment. My heart felt like it dissolved and reformed into something jagged. She'll get over it. Too soft. Let me move in sooner. The truth finally hit me. They hadn't moved Tyler in out of desperation. They moved him in because they assumed I'd bend. They counted on it, counted on me. I sank to the ground outside the patio door, tears falling silently, my hands trembling as they pressed into the cold grass. But beneath the heartbreak, beneath the humiliation, something else was forming, slow, steady, fierce. A new voice inside me whispered, "You deserved better than this long before today." I wiped my face, stood up, and walked back inside without them noticing. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I didn't slam a door or raise my voice, because I wasn't going to fight anymore. I was going to plan. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, I had pulled out every renovation receipt, every warranty, every contract, every document Daniel had told me to handle because he trusted me to be organized, and as I looked at the papers stacked neatly on the table, one fact glowed like a lifeline. Everything, every inch of this home I built was in my name. For the first time in months, I finally felt calm. Let them laugh tonight. By the time I was done, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the papers that represented months of my labor contracts, receipts, warranties, the deed to the house. Each one was a reminder that I had poured my soul into this home, and that my efforts weren't erased, no matter how Daniel and Tyler tried to make me feel invisible. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't angry. It was precise. First, I called the contractor who had done most of the work on the renovation. "I'm transferring all warranties and maintenance accounts into my name," I said, effective immediately. The contractor didn't hesitate. Daniel had never bothered to set these up himself. He assumed I would. Another mistake. Next, I contacted a lawyer. I explained everything: Tyler moving in under false pretenses, Daniel's complete disregard, and the fact that the house was legally mine. After a long pause, the lawyer said only, "She has every right to protect her property. You can take steps that will make them think twice about overstaying their welcome." I smiled at that. Then came the execution. I spent the day quietly packing my things. Not the essentials, their prideful expectation of me leaving without a fight, but my things. My clothes, my keepsakes, my laptop, and all the evidence of ownership and renovation. I left only a letter on the dining table, written with careful calmness. "You said I'd always get over it, but this time I got out of it. The house is legally mine. You have 30 days to vacate. Let your friend help you pack." I signed my name with deliberate precision. By the time Daniel woke up that morning, the house was eerily quiet. No smells of fresh coffee brewing, no sound of me tidying up or murmuring to myself. Just the letters on the table and a house that suddenly felt different, tenser, colder, aware. He read the note first. I watched from the window as his face went pale, disbelief flaring into anger and finally settling into stunned realization. Tyler came out of the spare room, saw the note, and for the first time that week, the cocky grin disappeared. The dog, sensing the tension, lay quietly at their feet. Daniel tried to speak, but I was already gone. Not just out of sight, I was out of their control, out of the space they had tried to claim as theirs. 30 days later, a neighbor sent me a photo. Boxes stacked in the driveway, Daniel and Tyler's defeated expressions, and Bear pawing at the empty porch as if questioning why his kingdom had turned quiet. My house stood behind them, untouched by their chaos, my renovations intact, my hard work unspoiled. I didn't return that day or the next, because revenge isn't just about seeing them falter. It's about reclaiming your own power, your own life, and choosing yourself over people who underestimated you. I moved into a small sunlit apartment, fresh and clean, with no muddy paw-prints, no shouting, no shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I could sleep without listening for the thud of someone else's boots in my home. I could make the space mine without compromise, without fear, without betrayal hanging over me like a shadow. And the sweetest part, I had left them with consequences they never anticipated. A house that wasn't theirs, a friendship that would fracture under the weight of lies, and the realization that I, the person they had tried to ignore and push aside, had walked away stronger, unbroken and free. That morning, I made a cup of tea, sat in my sunlit kitchen, and for the first time in a long time, smiled. Because some victories aren't loud. Some victories don't need confrontation. They just need you to rise quietly and let the world see that you're untouchable. And this was mine.